Hello everyone, I'm Daniela and welcome to today's video. My initial idea was to make the mid-year freakout tag, but it's August, so not the mid-year, and I don't think I could get away with it anymore, so I decided to do something a little bit different, and I'm just gonna do some rapid fire reviews of all the books I've read so far this year, and that's it. I hope you enjoy it. So, on January 1st, I read The Orange and Other Poems by Wendy Cope. The Orange is a very famous poem around here on Booktube, and I was very curious to read other poems by this author. So my favorite poem from this collection is called Dutch Portraits, and it goes like this. To find myself in tears is a surprise. Paintings don't often get to me like this. These faces with their vulnerable eyes and lips so soft that they invite a kiss. The long-haired husband, gazing at his bride with evident desire, his hand around her wrist, 6 years before she died, both so alive and so long underground. And here's a husband who resembles you, when you were plump and bearded. It's too much. He looks so happy and his wife does too. Still smiling, now they can no longer touch. Someone will read our story, by and by. Perhaps they'll feel like this. Perhaps they'll cry. It's beautiful. It's a very good collection with very good poems. And it's very accessible if you don't usually read poetry. It's a good start. Next, I read The Blade Itself by Joe Abercrombie. This is a fantasy book, and there's a character in this that tortures people for a living, and I love him. He's my favorite character, and I think that speaks for itself. The character work by Joe Abercrombie is great, and I can't wait to read the next of the series. Afterwards, I read Como Água para Chocolate, or Like Water for Chocolate by Laura Esquivel. And I was expecting 100 Years of Solitude, I'll admit, which is unfair for any book. And it has some very fun magical realism elements, but I honestly don't remember much about it, and that's a little unfortunate. Next, I read Great Expectations by Charles Dickens. Don't buy this edition. It looked great when I bought it. It looks like this now. I really enjoyed it. There's a character in this called Miss Havisham, and she wears her wedding gown every day, and she has her wedding feast rotten in her house, and she refuses to clean or change anything. Even the clocks are stopped. And if this created any imagery in your brain, it's just me transmitting what I read from Charles Dickens, which I can guarantee you is a lot better than what I described. And I know Charles Dickens doesn't need my endorsement, but here it is. Read Great Expectations. Next, I read Blue Horses by Mary Oliver. I had read some of her poems in compilations and I really enjoyed them. And this was half and half. It won me on the last few poems. I read them on the bus and I didn't want them to end, and I think that's the best thing I can say. So one of my favorite poems from this collection is the one that gives its title. It's called Franz Marc's Blue Horses. I step into the painting of the 4 blue horses. I'm not even surprised that I can do this. One of the horses walks toward me. His blue nose noses me lightly. I put my arm over his blue mane, not holding on, just commingling. He allows me my pleasure. Franz Marc died a young man, shrapnel in his brain. I would rather die than try to explain to the blue horses what war is. They would either faint in horror or simply find it impossible to believe. I do not know how to thank you, Franz Marc. Maybe our world will grow kinder eventually. Maybe the desire to make something beautiful is the peace of God that is inside each of us. Now all four horses have come closer, are bending their faces toward me as if they have secrets to tell. I don't expect them to speak, and they don't. If being so beautiful isn't enough, what could I possibly say? Mary Oliver has a lot of nature elements in her poetry, and I want to read more from her because of it. Next, Dulce Maria Cardoso, Autobiografia Não Autorizada. So obviously this is a Portuguese book. I don't think it has been translated, but some other works from this author have been. And this is a collection of her column in some newspapers. And so it has its ups and downs, obviously. There were some that really impacted me, and I haven't forgotten them. She has lived an interesting life, and she has very interesting things to say, so it was worth it. Next, I read Beloved by Toni Morrison. This is a very hard book to talk about. It's very sad and difficult because it has one of the most horrifying things that I've ever read about, and they were based on a true story. And Toni Morrison's writing is kind of impenetrable. You have to really pay attention to follow the narrative. It's not holding your hand, and I don't think it should. I hope to reread it someday because I just know a lot of it just went completely over my head. Amazing. I want to read more from her. Next, I read In Cold Blood by Truman Capote. I was watching the show, the second season of Feud, which is titled Capote versus the Swans. It's all about the downfall of Truman Capote, but this is the book that really made him famous. And so I was really curious, but I was just not ready for what I found. This is a very well-written, interesting book. It's not the first of the true crime genre, as I've seen in some places, but you can make a case for one of the most influential. It really puts you on the minds of the murderers, and I don't know if that was done back then very often. But it kept me at night. I was really moved by it and shocked, which I didn't expect, honestly. Very good book. Afterwards, I read another poetry book. This is called The Red Wheelbarrow and Other Poems by William Carlos Williams. I bought this book because I watched Patterson movie with Adam Driver, my favorite actor, and that movie made me want to write poetry, and so I wanted to read a book of poetry from the author that is mentioned the most in the movie, and it just didn't connect with me. I don't think it's bad poetry, I just couldn't really connect to it. I will read you one of my favorite poems from this. It's called The Last Words of My English Grandmother. And it's something like this. There were some dirty plates and a glass of milk beside her on a small table near the rank, disheveled bed. Wrinkled and nearly blind, she lay and snored, rousing with anger in her tones to cry for food. Give me something to eat. They're starving me. I'm all right. I won't go to the hospital. No. Give me something to eat. Let me take you to the hospital, I said. And after you are well, you can do as you please. She smiled. Yes, You do what you please first, then I can do what I please. Oh, she cried as the ambulance man lifted her to the stretcher. Is this what you call making me comfortable? By now her mind was clear. Oh, you think you're smart, you young people, she said, but I'll tell you don't know anything. Then we started. On the way we passed a long row of elms. She looked at them a while out of the ambulance window and said, What are all those fuzzy looking things out there? Trees? Well, I'm tired of them, and rolled her head away. Next, I read Heaven by Mieko Kawakami. If you've been bullied when you were in school and you want to relive a little bit of that trauma, this is a good book for that. I will say, it made me feel better about the bullying I suffered, because at least it wasn't like this. Yep. Next, I read Waiting for Godot by Samuel Beckett. This is a play, so obviously reading it is not the same experience as seeing it, which is something I hope I will do eventually. It is a very interesting play, and it's very humorous. So I think the performances will really bring out the humor of the text, but just reading it, it wasn't communicating with me as well. But I love the concept, and I'm glad it exists, and I hope to see it live one day. Afterwards, I read I Remain in Darkness by Annie Ernaux. This is the first book by Annie Ernaux that I read, and I was looking for a short book that I could read in like an hour or two. And what I got was Annie Ernaux's experiences as her mother started developing Alzheimer's and dementia. And it's a very raw and honest diary of what it's like to watch someone that you've known your whole life just fade away and transform into someone else that you can't recognize, and the person doesn't recognize herself. It's something that scares me a lot, losing yourself in your own mind, and so it really affected me. But it's a very, very good book, and I hope to read more from this author. Next, I read Pedro Páramo by Juan Rulfo. I picked this book up because it was mentioned as one of the inspirations for Gabriel Garcia Marquez, who has written 100 Years of Solitude, one of my favorite books. And I can see it. I can totally see it. It's a weird book. You don't know who's talking, what's going on. I think I will like it more on a second reading. It's very different and innovative, and I think it's well worth giving it a chance. Next, I read Slaughterhouse-Five by Kurt Vonnegut, and I think you can see that I really, really liked it. I'm hoping to make a video just about this book. I was completely fascinated reading this. I underlined so much and I put so much subs because I found it so well written, so interesting. As an historical document, as a testament to the literary movement of the time, I think it's great, and I want to talk more about it to you guys. Next, I read Slow Days, Fast Company by Eve Babbitt. This is my second Babbitt, and I loved it. 5 stars for me. This is fiction, apparently. I don't believe it. I think this is just her life. She's young and hot, she lives in California, and amazing things happen to her that will never happen to me. And she writes them so well and so interestingly, and I just want to read everything she has ever written. Finally, from the physical books I've read, The Hummingbird by Sandro Veronesi. Some men are just not very good at writing women. and he tried, but most of the characters are just really flat. The structure is interesting, but the narrative is really not something very innovative, at least to me. So yeah, it was fine, and that's it. Now, for the books that I've read but I don't have them physically, I read The Color Purple by Alice Walker. Amazing book. One of those books that changes how you see the world, that uses language in a very interesting way. Amazing. I read it almost in one sitting. I read it because the movie was coming out, and then I forgot about the movie. When it's the movie, the book is perfect. Afterwards, I read Foster by Claire Keegan. I thought it was a great story. It's very short, but the characters felt so real. It was a feel-good moment. So well written. Highly recommend. Then I decided to read Small Things Like These by Claire Keegan because it's one of her most acclaimed books, and I just didn't feel the same way at all. I thought it was clunky. I didn't think the characters were interesting. I know what she was trying to do, trying to talk about a topic that is not very well known. Unfortunately, it was well known to me, and I had listened to podcasts and other media about it, so there wasn't the shock of learning what was happening because I understood what was happening from the beginning, and so it just didn't work as well for me. Afterwards, I read On Sun Swallowing by Dakota Warren. I like her videos. Yeah, her videos are okay. I also read The Familiar by Lee Bardugo. I read it. A Jangada de Pedra by José Saramago. José Saramago is my favorite author, so I think anything that he has written I will love. It was great, characters are great, story is great. I love him. And that's it. Those are the books I've read so far this year. Very excited for the ones that I'll be reading and that I'll read afterwards. I hope you stay tuned for that. You can follow me on all the other socials, TikTok, Instagram, Goodreads, Storygraph. I have all of them. And yeah, I hope you stay on for my next video.